There's a sports card up for auction right now that might break the all-time record for the most expensive sports card ever sold. We'll tell you why this card is so important next. Hello, and here we go. Welcome to another episode of the Geoff Wilson Show. When you think about the most iconic sports cards of all time, those that are likely to command the most at an auction, you probably think about the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle card. And for good reason. That card sold in SGC 9.5 condition for a record $12.6 million not too long ago. Or maybe you think of Honus Wagner and his iconic T206 card, because those cards routinely do multiple millions, many millions in auction as well. But you might not think about the card that could beat all of their records. The 1914 Baltimore News Babe Ruth card is perhaps the most sought after of them all. It's certainly one of the most rare cards in existence. And it's up for auction right now at Robert Edwards Auctions. Will it break the all-time record? And why is this card so important to so many collectors? We're going to dive in and get all the details and the history of that card right now. My guest today is Brian Dwyer. He's the president and owner of Robert Edwards Auctions. And they, of course, have the card up for auction right now. So Brian is going to share the card with us and tell us a lot more about its backstory. This is going to be a fascinating episode, so let's get started. Brian, welcome to the Geoff Wilson Show.
Thanks, Geoff. Good to be here.
I'm really excited to have you on because I'm really excited to talk about this card. Whenever a card comes up for auction that has potential of breaking the all-time record for the most expensive sports cards sold, it is a big deal. And of course, we don't know if this Babe Ruth card will get there or not, but it will probably get close. I mean, this card is a card that could do upwards or above $10 million. So right off the bat, Brian, for people who are not familiar with this 1914 Babe Ruth Baltimore News card, give people the background here. Tell people what this card is.
Yeah, so I mean, this is literally the first card ever made of Babe Ruth. This is his rookie card. This is where it all started. This is him at 19 years old. And let's just go right into it. There it is.
Wow.
So this picture's Babe Ruth, 19 years old, fresh out of literally high school. I mean, he was saved by manager Jack Dunn from a life of trouble and put on the baseball field. And this card captures it all.
So I actually don't know much about Babe Ruth's early history. Like, you obviously have read stories about him, his heroic efforts with the Red Sox and the Yankees. But, that card must have been made before he was the Babe Ruth that we know him as today, which is one of the greatest ball players of all time. Back then, 19 years old. So he was just starting out his career, I guess. And I guess there was optimism about him, enough optimism to have a baseball card. But probably at that point, nobody really knew what his career was going to go on to be.
Absolutely. And nobody had any idea. And at 7 years old, Babe Ruth was made a ward of the school, the St. Mary's School for Boys. So he was basically removed from his family, put into this school, and kept under the custody and control, basically, of these school teachers and priests that ran this school. And he played baseball, probably just knocking around as a kid. Don't forget, Babe Ruth started as a pitcher. So he was playing baseball in Baltimore, where he was born and raised. And Jack Dunn, who was a lifelong baseball man, saw Ruth throwing the ball, playing ball, and Jack Dunn owned a team called the Orioles. They were a minor league team in the International League. Dunn goes to Ruth, says, "Would you be interested in playing for me?" Ends up becoming Ruth's legal guardian. That's the only way that he could get Babe Ruth to play for his team. And 19 years old, he goes, he plays for Baltimore. Baltimore News is one of the biggest papers in the area at that time. They produce this card and cards of other teammates as a schedule. So on the back of the card, they have the home and away schedule for the team. And Ruth was a pitcher for the team. They had some degree of success, but they were eventually run out of town by the competition from the Federal League that started that same year. And Dunn, in order to make himself survive financially, had to sell Ruth to the Red Sox. So that's how
Interesting.
we get to Babe Ruth being the Red Sox and the Yankees that we all associate with him today. But he started off as a Baltimore Oriole.
I did not know that. There you go. That is a really fascinating piece of baseball history. And that one of my questions I was going to ask you was, why is he on a Baltimore News card? Like, why is that his rookie and as opposed to a Red Sox card? And now I know the answer to that. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, a lot of people associate him in the Sporting News. So another newspaper in 1916 pictured him for the first time as a member of the Red Sox. But this is 2 years earlier. I mean, 19 years old. I cannot overstate how incredible it is that, again, to your point, nobody knew that he was going to be Babe Ruth like we know him today. And they made a card of him, and there's only 10 of them that have survived.
That is wild. That is really wild. And of course, today, when you think of a player's rookie card, if Babe Ruth were rookie in 2023, well, first of all, he'd be in, 30 different sets, right? And then of course you'd have a million parallels within each of those sets, but he'd be in a ton of sets, but then he'd also be in a ton of sets in 2024, and he'd be in a ton of sets in 2025. And by the time he's 25 years old, he's probably got, 500 different baseball cards out there on the market, not even including all of the parallels of those cards, right?
Right.
But that wasn't the case back in 1914. This was the only card. So this was not only the only card of him in 1914, but then there wasn't a card in 15, right? So you had to wait till that 16 Sporting News card before you ever saw him on a card again. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, he's pictured with the Boston Red Sox team on a postcard from 1915. But yes, as an individual player, he goes 2 years without having another card made. The funny thing is, we talk about variations and parallels. They actually issued this card in 1914 in red and blue. So it was one of the earliest variation cards. You could get it in blue, you could get it in red. This just so happens to be red.
Interesting. That's fascinating. Is either one considered, more rare than the other?
The grading companies don't differentiate the colors. I think there are fewer blues. But, no matter how you slice it, with only 10 of them to go around, beggars can't be choosers when it comes to color.
Sure. Yeah. Both of them are obviously extremely rare. And am I correct in saying this one's graded in SGC3?
Correct. Yep.
And that is the second highest ever graded out of the 10. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, so 2 of them remain ungraded, but of the ones that have been graded so far, PSA is graded a 4, and this SGC3 is the second highest one ever graded by PSA or SGC. And it's actually the highest graded one to come up for sale in 15 years. So they're just not available. They don't come up for auction. One hasn't hit the auction block in a decade, and this one just so happens to be the second best graded example.
So obviously this being Babe Ruth's rookie card is an obvious reason why this would be valuable. But unlike something like the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle card, so many people are familiar with that 52 Topps Mickey Mantle, whereas this card is unfamiliar to a lot of collectors, especially newer collectors who may not have studied the history of vintage baseball cards. Why do you think this card is going to be able to fetch as much or maybe even more at auction than the highest, 52 Mantle ever to have sold, which I believe sold for 12.6 million, in the SGC 9.5 copy?
Yeah, I mean, so in our opinion, this is the most significant card ever made. I mean, Babe Ruth, first card, first appearance, 19 years old. There's just so much going for it. When you talk about value and when you talk about supporting the value that we believe it can bring, $10 million, it's a huge number, but it comes down to the numbers. more than 2,800 copies of the 1952 mantle have been authenticated by PSA, SGC, Beckett, major grading companies. 60 Honus Wagners are known to exist. That's a card that the buy-in is $3 million now for a one example. So this card, rarity, significance, it hasn't had its time to shine in this modern hobby that we're all enjoying because it's been 10 years since it's hit the auction block. So we think that once people understand how significant it is, they'll very quickly come around to the fact that it should be mentioned in that conversation with Mantle at 12.6 and Wagner's at $6 and $7 million.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Yeah, the point that you just made about the print run of the 52 mantle, I mean, that's a good point. I was surprised not too long ago. I was looking, for example, at the population reports of the 1933 Gaudy Babe Ruth cards because I love 33 Gaudy. It's one of my favorite. It's probably, I mean, I'd say it's got to be my favorite of all the vintage sets out there. I just think that's a wonderful set. And I was looking at the Babe Ruths in particular, and I looked across PSA and SGC, and I believe the number, and I'm going off the top of my head, but I believe the number was there were around 7,000 total graded of the 33 Gaudy Babe Ruths across PSA and SGC. Of course, that's 4 different card designs, but it's combined. I think there was 7,000 plus. So it's really not, those cards are not that rare, even though in high grade, obviously they can become worth $1 million plus as well. Yep. But those cards are not that rare. Then you get to a card like, you said the 52 Topps mantle, also actually not that rare, very valuable, and especially in high grade because it's so iconic and it's so desired, but really not that rare, especially when you compare it to a card like this, 10 total copies in existence. I mean, that's pretty wild to think about. And it's different than a ultra modern card that has 10 total copies in existence. People might be thinking in their mind like, well, all the Prism Golds out of 10, there's only 10 of those. But those cards still come up all the time for resale. Like ultra modern cards, even if there are only 10 of them, you almost always see 2 or 3 of the 10 pop out in an auction sometime over the course of the year. Yep. This one, there's only 10 of, but I'm guessing that a lot of those 10 are probably locked away in family collections and just have never seen their way to the auction block for forever.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, for a couple years back in the early 2000s, these used to trade once a year, basically. And then they got just absorbed into massive, very significant, very valuable collections. And the motivation for people to let go of a card that they know they can't replace, they know is hugely significant, and people aren't necessarily finding more of them is, it's just not attractive for them to let go. So for this to hit the block, I mean, that's the thing that we're trying to impress upon people. It is not only a very significant card, it's a very significant opportunity because it might not come around again.
You said 15 years since this card in this grade or above has surfaced?
So it's the first time that this card, this example that I just showed, that's the first time that example will have ever hit the auction block. 15 years ago, the PSA 4 sold. So if you ever wanted to get a high grade example, that was your last best chance probably, because it's tucked away in a permanent collection now.
Yeah, and that's the thing about these super old, super rare cards is you may not have the opportunity to acquire that card again for a very long period of time. You've got to think if there's a buyer out there who is a, baseball super collector, vintage super collector, and let's say that individuals in their 50s or 60s or 70s, probably somebody who's had an extremely successful career, obviously has built up, considerable wealth. If that individual wants this card, because this card is something that will really help, just further their collection, this could be their last chance to get this card, particularly in this type of quality, right? This might be it. Like if you're in your 50s or 60s, if you pass on this opportunity, you may never see this card in this type of grade ever come up for auction again for the rest of your life.
Without a doubt. I mean, we've had people knocking on our door for the last decade trying to buy the examples that we sold back in 2005 and 6 and 7. And every one of those offers has been rejected. So this is a statement piece. The people that own them know their significance. And we're hoping that we can educate people about why it is such a monumental card.
Yeah. I would like to delve a little bit more into the comparison with the Honus Wagner because these cards are around the same era, right? I mean, the Honus Wagner is part of the T206 set from 1909 through 1911. This card is a 1914 card. So you're right around the same time area. I think, if you found 100 baseball card collectors at a card show and pulled them aside and said, showed them a picture of the Honus Wagner and said, what is this card? Probably 95% would get the answer right. But if you pull those same 100 people aside and showed them a picture of this 1914 Baltimore News Babe Ruth card and said, what is this card? I don't know what percent get it right, but it's a lot less than 95%. It might be less than 50%. It might be less than 25%. It's a card you just don't see as often. Why do you think, with how iconic the Honus Wagner is, that this one is going to perhaps be able to go on and outsell any example of the Wagner card? And you even yourself said you think this one's actually more iconic.
Yeah, so I mean, the funny thing is, yes, to your point, the T206 Wagner is more instantly recognizable to a hobbyist. But if you go and you do a man on the street interview, almost probably 100 out of 100 would recognize the name Babe Ruth. 2 years ago, we sold a Honus Wagner for $6.6 million. And at that time, it was the highest price ever realized for a trading card. And I would tell family and friends and associates, I'm selling this Honus Wagner card. And they say, well, who's Honus Wagner? You don't have to explain to people who Babe Ruth is. And we think that's what will give this card the bump and the benefit over a Wagner. You cannot argue Ruth's significance to the game. You cannot argue Ruth's significance to the hobby. Ruth is really a cultural icon at this point, beyond even just sports. Once people understand that this is the genesis of Ruth, and every other collectible of Ruth that's ever sold for big bucks started with this one, that's when we think it'll start to sink in.
Do you think interest in Babe Ruth right now has peaked maybe somewhat because of the excitement that Shohei Ohtani has brought to Major League Baseball, all of a sudden doing things that haven't ever been done since Babe Ruth?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, he's back in the conversation, right? So whenever you look at what Ohtani's doing, Ruth gets mentioned in the same breath. You've got the card companies leaning into Babe Ruth, chase cards, superfractors, dual autos. I mean, they know that Ruth propels sales, propels interest, is the backbone of the hobby. So that all, in our opinion, bodes well for this card, because without this card, you don't get Babe Ruth.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Can we see the card again real quick? Can you hold it up there one more time? Look at that. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. I imagine the border on that card. So these cards had either red or blue borders, as you said. That's got to make them even more condition sensitive, that you've got a colored border going around the edge, which makes it easier. It exposes, I'm sure, edge wear and that type of thing a little bit easier than not.
Without a doubt, yeah. They're often found chipped. They're often found with big pieces missing. Most of the ones that have been graded are in the 1 or 1.5 range. So this got a nice full red border, not too much chipping, obviously graded a 3. I mean, it's got it all going for it.
What do we know about the origins of this particular copy?
It's got a great story. So in 1914, the Baltimore News, as I mentioned earlier, was a newspaper in the Baltimore area. This card was collected by a paper boy, and it was kept in his family for more than 100 years. They kept it along. Yeah, so they tucked it away. They passed it through generation after generation. Ruth was the big one, but they had 14 other cards from this set. So this group of 15, all of which are in our current auction, represents one of the largest collections of these cards known. 1998 rolls around, the family loans them to the Babe Ruth Birthplace Museum in Baltimore. So for more than 20 years, this example serves as the resident example in Babe Ruth's Birthplace Museum, shown to the public, educate the public about it. until just recently when it entered a private collection prior to being sold by us. So, unimpeachable provenance. Whoever owns this card after the auction will be only the third owner, and it's just an amazing story that somebody had the foresight to keep it for all that time.
Yeah, that's incredible. So all those years, 100+ years of this card in existence, it's only ever had 3 owners, and this is the first time that it's ever been up for public auction.
Correct. Yep.
Wow, that's pretty outstanding. Yeah, I love this story. I can't believe that the family kept that card through the years like that. That paper boy, he apparently really knew what he was doing back in 1914, holding on to that card.
He did well for himself and for his family.
Yeah, what a cool way to pass down something special and a lot of wealth along with it, generationally speaking. I've kept my whole collection of 1987 Topps cards to pass down to my son and grandson and great-grandson, and hopefully that will go down the lineage, and someday that 1987 Topps collection will be worth $14 million, or something of that nature. I have a feeling that's probably not going to be the case with 87 Topps, but it's kind of fun to think about.
For some of those cards, if you could get 14 cents, you'd be doing okay.
That's right. That's true. That is absolutely true. Unfortunately, yes. Okay, this is incredible, and I want to talk a little bit more about just kind of the vintage market in general, but first, just the specifics of this particular auction. So this right now, this is going live at REA. When is this auction ending? When's the big day?
December 3rd. So you would want to have your bids in prior to December 3rd. We'll close down bidding at 9 p.m. that night, 9 p.m. Eastern, and we'll declare a winner after a couple hours of back and forth, everybody getting their final bids in. So this is one of more than 4,000 items that we have up. So even if you don't have a $10 million budget, there's a lot of great stuff up for auction.
Okay, that's cool. Well, I'll definitely check it out. And so December 3rd, that night, there's going to be probably a lot of people on REA's website clicking refresh, seeing what this card is doing. I remember doing that with some big auctions in the past, and this one, I think in particular, there's probably going to be a lot of people watching that and getting excited to see where it goes.
Without a doubt. Yeah, we're excited. I mean, that's why we play the game, so to speak. So up for bid, anybody can walk away with it as long as you can write the check.
Right, for sure. Now, I know at REA, you guys do a lot of vintage, a lot of, kind of all-time great type of collectibles. What have you seen in that vintage market over the last couple of years?
Well, we've seen incredible growth in that market, just like the larger hobby in general. I mean, we've always advocated the vintage players, the Babe Ruths, the Mickey Mantles, the Jackie Robinsons of the world. Their greatness is pretty cemented. We're not going to argue over what they can accomplish, or will they be a Hall of Famer, or did they get injured in last night's game? So that's what's always drawn us to vintage. That being said, the best of the best is just continuing to break records. Whenever we sell something that's highest graded or very rare, very low population, the demand is there. So we've seen a lot of new people, and we've seen a gravitation to the best of the best and the rarest of the rare.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the entire sports card industry, has seen, obviously over the last few years, ultra modern cards. They've gone down a lot. We've seen, most ultra modern cards have sunk in value often. There are occasional exceptions to that, and the exceptions are either a player who's doing outstandingly well, like, Shohei Ohtani's market has obviously been very good over the last couple of years overall, despite the fact that, ultra modern cards have gone down overall. Or in some very select cases where there is a particular ultra modern card that kind of meets the criteria of this being a true scarce chase card that you might not see come up for auction again, and that some collectors out there really, really want. Those are harder to find these days in the ultra modern market because it's harder to say that any one card is irreplaceable, because even if you really want the one of one, national treasures NFL shield card for a particular football player, there's also a one of one NFL Shield card over in Flawless as well, right? Or and in a whole bunch of other sets. So it's a little bit harder to have, I think, that level of chase card in the ultra modern market because there's just so much variety of high end cards with so many different players. In vintage, obviously, that's not the case. You know, if you want Babe Ruth's best rookie card, or in this case, I guess his second best rookie card in terms of overall grade, this is it. Like there's, this is it. And there's nothing to replace it by. And so the vintage market, as you said, particularly with those really scarce one of a kind items, you're still seeing records set on many of them, despite the fact that the overall, like if you look at the overall sports card market, it has definitely, values have definitely come down over the last couple of years, as has many forms of alternative assets. Do you think it is, what continues to drive interest in these cards, and what continues to drive people to pull out their wallets and spend that type of money despite interest rates being where they are, despite the economy, being uncertain in a lot of people's minds? What keeps this market going as strong as it has been?
Well, I mean, I think sports has always been a hugely important part of our culture. I mean, you go back generations, centuries, sport has always been there. And I think that particularly when times do get a little tough, people want to gravitate to things that they can enjoy. And, we've observed some of our best years as a company have been some of the bleakest years for the economy. And people are shifting outside of maybe your traditional stocks and other assets where they have less control over them and saying, look, if I'm going to give up control, I might as well have fun and enjoy something and have something tangible. And so they're parking their money in these cards, which in the vintage arena have at least proven to be pretty decent stores of value for them. And so that's what I think you get. I mean, sports, people relate to, people grew up, people collected cards as kids in many instances, and it's easy for them to, get excited and justify spending the money on them.
Yeah, for sure. And these things are a lot of money. It's easy to get that collecting bug and end up, spending a lot of money on these types of cards, but it also has this level of satisfaction and excitement, getting those cards. And from a value standpoint, for the most part, if you zoom out and, you look at things holistically over the last 5 or 10 years, a lot of these things have also been a really solid, strong investment, particularly with the type of cards that, you guys deal with a lot at REA, particularly the cards of the all-time greats, particularly the cards that are kind of scarce, that are hard to find, that aren't super common cards you see every day. You've been in this business for a long time. You've seen the ups and downs of the general market. You've seen ups and downs of the economy. What gives you confidence that interest in sports cards, whether it's vintage or modern, what gives you confidence that is going to continue to grow and expand, as we look 5, 10, 20 years out into the future?
Well, I mean, I think it comes back to what I was saying earlier, the fact that sport is so deeply ingrained in our culture. I don't think that baseball is going to go anywhere anytime soon. And I think as long as you have a vibrant game, and we've seen some rule changes that have totally changed the public's relationship with MLB in the last year or so, I think that that's going to breed collectors. And I look at my own son. He loves opening baseball cards and playing with them. And I think that you'll see that continue. And then if you approach this market as an investor, there's a lot of history and there's a lot of graphs and charts and performance that you can look at. I'll tell you a quick story. The last time a Baltimore News Babe Ruth sold at auction was 10 years ago, and it sold for $451,000 in a PSA 1. In that exact same auction, there was a PSA 1 Honus Wagner, graded a 1, same grade as the Ruth, and it sold for less. It sold for $402,000. Just last year, that same Wagner example sold for $3.7 million. So I think that type of performance, that type of history, that type of charting gives people the confidence that this is not going anywhere. And you look at art. I mean, some of the great masters of the art world have been dead for centuries, and there's still the appreciation for what they did and what they accomplished, and people enjoy collecting it.
Yeah, that's super exciting. Okay, so for somebody who doesn't have a $10 million budget perhaps to spend on this card. You mentioned 4,000 other items in your upcoming auction. What other types of things for somebody on a smaller budget might they want to keep an eye on that could be potentially good things for them to get into for the long term for their collection?
Yeah, so I mean, it runs the gamut. We have all major sports. We have non-sport collectibles. We have cards, autographs, tickets, game used memorabilia. If you're into Ruth, we've got more Gaudy Ruths than you'll know what to do with. T206 Cobbs, 30 of them in this auction. There's a lot of variety. If you're into sets or singles or whatever catches your eye, things in this auction are going to start at $100 and up. So there's something for all budgets. There's something for all types of collectors. And there's a lot of material that we think, you might not get another shot at. Even if it's not a $10 million card, there's some stuff in here that's fresh to the hobby, that's very exciting, and it could be another good bit of time before you see it again.
Other than sports cards, you mentioned other areas that you have in the auction, like tickets and memorabilia. What segments of collectibles, of sports collectibles, are you seeing new growth and interest in? I've noticed, for example, Type 1 photos seem to be getting a lot more attention, than they were a year or two ago, right? Obviously, tickets had, I'd say, kind of a big boom in attention and popularity over the last couple of years, right? And so what are you seeing now? Like, where do you think maybe that trend line is going in terms of these various areas of collectibles?
Yeah, so I mean, photography was definitely one area that I was going to point to. We've got some amazing photographs coming up, and I think that's a market that's really poised for some exciting growth. I've always been particularly bullish on game-used memorabilia. You look at what the cards of these players command. You can have a bat that Hank Aaron swung. You can have a jersey that Mickey Mantle wore. You can have things that these players used in their trade for not that much money comparatively. So I think that there's still some room to grow there. We've got some great items in this auction that are game used: Brady jersey, Jabbar jersey, Reggie Jackson jersey. We sold a Babe Ruth bat last auction for over $1.3 million. Another area that I think is pretty exciting, and it goes to the modern hobby, is the unopened material. We've got over 400 lots of boxes and packs, rack packs, cello packs, wax packs, you name it. That's an area that's very exciting because you've got two diverging paths. You've got the path that keeps it sealed, and then you've got the path that opens it up and goes prospecting. So that's an area that we have kind of leaned into because we think it's very exciting and very interesting, and there's some cool stuff being offered there.
Yeah, that is always fascinating, seeing the old wax boxes and wax packs show up in your auctions. It's incredible. I mean, it's incredible to think of a card surviving, 50 or 70 or 100 years. But it's even, in my opinion, it's sometimes even more incredible to think of a pack or a box surviving 50 or 70 years of it not being opened by anybody. Like that's a pretty wild thing. At the National last year, I opened up a pack of sealed 1952 Bowman baseball, a single pack of it. And it was just like wild to think that pack had sat there for 70 years unopened. And I was taking the chance on opening it, right? Hoping to pull one of the big cards out of it. I didn't, unfortunately, but that's how that goes. But the excitement of it was certainly incredible.
Yeah, we marvel at the strength that people show not opening these, but that's what makes it fun. There's no wrong way to collect.
Yeah, 100%. That's awesome. All right, Brian. So for people who are interested in whether it's the Ruth card and they're gonna get their investment accounts ready to make that purchase, or whether it's something much smaller, as you mentioned, items starting at $100. How do people get registered and see all these items and get ready for this next REA auction?
For sure. So you'll want to head to our website, which is robertedwardauctions.com. Once you're there, you can sign up, you can browse, you can bid, you can request a free catalog. We have a 728-page catalog. So if you're old school and you want to flip through and read and learn, you can get one of those mailed to you for free. You can check us out online, all of our social channels. We're putting up videos daily, posting daily with highlights from the auctions. And then going forward, that's where we'll tease new, fresh finds and fun stuff coming in future auctions.
Awesome. That's great, Brian. Anything else for people to know before we wrap up?
No, I mean, I think we covered a lot of ground here. I mean, this card, I'll show it again just because you can never get tired of seeing it. But this card is, in our opinion, one of the most significant, if not the most significant cards ever created. And that's Babe Ruth looking into the distance, not knowing what's coming for him or what's coming for his future. And this is where it all started. So we're excited to tell the story. We're excited to get it up for auction. And hopefully, when this auction ends, we'll be excited to turn in a big number for it.
For sure. That's incredible. It is capturing an incredible moment in time of a career that went on to be, quite possibly the best ever. So appreciate you sharing the card with us, Brian. Good luck at the auction, and we will all be watching attentively on December the 3rd to see what that card and all the other items you have go for.
Appreciate it, Geoff. Thanks so much.
Take care. Wow, how much fun is that going to be to see what that card sells for? We will definitely be keeping an eye on it on December 3rd, and we will let you know. Hopefully, we have some records in our future. All right, guys, if you enjoyed the episode, please hit like, please subscribe, and I wanted to remind you that the full-length videos and audio recordings of all of these Geoff Wilson Show episodes, they're available on YouTube under the Geoff Wilson Show channel, and they're also available on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. Just search for the Geoff Wilson Show. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Take care.